Hello and welcome to our reaction video for the discrimination lecture. Today it's gonna be hopefully a rather shorter video, and that's because most of you have given exactly the right answers for the analysis of the two decisions. That's great, and I also want to say thank you because this time we have reached the threshold of half the students providing answers or comments, so that's great, and that's thanks to you. So thank you for continuing to find the time, the motivation, and the concentration to deal with European and international labor law while you are most probably stuck at home in this very chaotic time. I hope you are all doing fine, and let's dive in with your answers and comments. So we'll start from the first part. So the part where I asked you to reflect about the very existence of the concept of discrimination based on age, and I asked you why someone could conclude that we don't even need such a thing as age discrimination, protection against age discrimination, because there's a difference between age discrimination and gender and so on. So I have received different answers. Many of you, a few of you, have pointed out the question of experience, saying that in the end, age discrimination can often be instead seen as discrimination based on experience, as generally older people will have more experience than younger people, so it would be justified on that ground to treat better an older worker than a younger one because it's experience, it's not age. And that is correct. I mean, if you can find such a ground, then it's fine. But keep in mind, I'm already jumping to the second section, but just a parenthesis, keep in mind what you have read in Cuckoo de Vesey, in the case that you have read this week. The court wants a concrete situation where actually you can justify a difference of treatment on the basis of something else that is not age. The court will look at the specific situation. So you cannot just say, well, he is old and he is more experienced. In order to justify a difference in treatment with someone younger, you will have to prove that there is actually a difference in their experience, and that the difference in experience has an impact on their work. Okay. So, but yes, sometimes, many times, you can use different criteria than age to justify a difference in treatment between younger workers and older workers. Right. But that, I mean, it's a good point and a good answer, but that's not exactly a reason not to have discrimination based on age, because there will be situations where no, that's not actually experience, it's actually a difference in treatment. So the other answers have pointed out how most often young workers are treated badly with respect to older workers, because it's easier to find other reasons to treat them badly, because they're new, because they're young, because they don't need as much money, and so on. And you are correct in this. We have many examples, and I mentioned this idea that you have to treat young workers badly in order to help them find a job. And actually, this is also a part of another answer from one of you that said there is a difference between age discrimination and the others, because you can justify more easily age discrimination because in the directive you have a specific justification for discrimination based on age on the basis of labor market policies. Okay. And if you want to see this in action, if you're still curious and you still want to read more decisions about age discrimination, this is not an obligation, don't worry. I've already suggested some of you to check the case in Abercrombie, Yes, it's that Abercrombie clothing store, I suppose, with half naked sometimes people working in there. So Abercrombie in Italy was using a specific contract, which was meant again to help young workers find a job. And it was a contract with worse working condition, of course, and it was a contract you could use up to 25 years. What Abercrombie did was to fire people when they reached 25 years. So when they had to change contract to a better one, they just fired them. And so there was a case, and workers said, this is age discrimination. I'm being fired at 25. But the court said, no, this is fine, because that contract ends at 25. And this is justified by labor market policy of Italy. So yes, it is much easier to justify a discrimination based on age, whether because there are other criteria that one can invoke, or because the directive itself provides for a new justification that is not present for other grounds based on the labor market policies. And one of you also has mentioned many other elements that you can use. For instance, that young people are more innovative or flexible or mobile, and older workers can fall sick more easily. Yes, you see, there are many things. The fact that they can fall sick, it's also discrimination based on health, but that's not the point. So in fact, you can find, if you want to find them, other reasons not related to age to justify a discrimination based on age. Few others of you have answered by reminding how this is important still. So it's different because it does not cover two categories which are one against the other, but everyone, because everyone will be young and old. So this is an important principle and it should be protected, and that's right. But that doesn't tell us why someone then would argue it shouldn't even exist. Another answer was that age discrimination is more difficult to use because in many cases age works in a very abstract and clear-cut way. And the example, a very good example, was voting or consuming alcohol. We just decided before 18, you don't know anything about the word, you cannot vote, and at 18, you know everything perfectly and you can vote for everything, okay? And of course, this is very abstract and this is very rigid, if you want. So that was to say that age discrimination is a difficult criteria, because we use age in this kind of way in which, at a certain point, you unlock everything, like in a video game. It was a very good example, the one of video games. So you just reach a certain level and then everything is open to you. And before, nothing is open. So it's rare that you can justify, that you can find age discrimination because we have all these rules based on age. But still, the answer said there might be some stereotyping going on. And so, for instance, let's say about stereotyping, it might be true that young workers might be more innovative because they bring in new knowledge, they have just finished their studies and so on. But if you, as an employer, say, I will only hire young workers because they are innovative, then you are stereotyping, and this is discrimination, okay? On the other hand, if you actually have someone and you have, let's say, suppose you have to promote someone, and there is a young worker and a young worker and an old one, and you promote the young worker, and the old one will go to court and say, this is discrimination. The employer did not promote me because I'm old. The employer might say, no, that's because the young worker is more innovative, and I can prove it in this way, because he has this diploma, he has developed this project, and so on. So again, you can't justify non-discrimination. You can justify difference in treatment based on concrete and practical situations, but you cannot blanket justify discrimination based on stereotyping. I do not hire older workers because they fall sick all the time. This is stereotyping, okay? So be careful in this. There is a difference between stereotyping and real, actual justification of difference of treatment. And then there was the last answer, which is actually exactly what I was thinking. So the exercise in mind reading was very good. The last answer said, well, the philosophical problem with age discrimination, it was not exactly what the answer said, but is that everyone, supposing you do not die, of course, but everyone in theory will be young and then will be old, okay? So because of that, a person will experience both situations. So suppose you are treated less in a worse way when you're young. When you will be old, you will profit from the fact that other young people are treated badly, okay? So the idea is that age discrimination makes no sense, because in the end you benefit from both situations in society, when you're young and then when you're old. And so by using age discrimination, it allows some people to cheat and to invoke discrimination when they are young, but still enjoy all the benefits of older workers when they are old, or vice versa. Okay. So that's the theoretical case for not having age discrimination at all as a principle. Of course, you might also reverse this argument. So in the end, it's not necessarily what we our conclusion that we should not have age discrimination at all, protection against age discrimination at all. You can reverse it by saying, if we have protection against age discrimination, you will benefit from protection against age discrimination when you're young, and then you will benefit again when you're old, so the situation is essentially the same. But still, this is the case for not having protection against age discrimination, the fact that you will be young and then you will also be old, so you will be experiencing both situations. Whereas, for instance, if you are discriminated on the basis of your race, it is unlikely that you will be able to change it. Okay, let's say impossible. So you will never experience both sides in society. Okay. So this is the point about age discrimination. Now about the decisions, we can be relatively quick because, as I said, you have identified the good points, and the points were that in Kuku-Devesi, the Court of Justice says that a national code can disapply national legislation which is at odds, which is in violation of an EU directive underpinned by a fundamental right of non-discrimination, even though the directive has not yet been transposed, but the transposition period has finished, has ended. So now the situation is covered by EU law, even though the member state has not transposed it yet. So yes, that's a very powerful tool, because the code says the national code does not need to send a preliminary question to the Court of Justice before disapplying the national legislation. So every court, every tribunal, first instance tribunals everywhere in Europe can, if they of course find a good justification, but can disapply national legislation at odds with EU law. Okay, so that's of course a very powerful tool. Of course, a powerful tool engenders certain problems, and I wanted you to read the Ayos case, which is not particularly spectacular in many reasons, but it's a very good example of which problems arise, because then you have the situation where an employer, in this case, was perfectly following the law, the national legislation, the applicable legislation. So the employer does exactly what the law says, and then the national code finds that this is at odds with EU law, disapply national legislation, and there you are, the employer is condemned to pay a certain amount of money, let's say. Okay, so this is a frustrating situation for the employer. The employer was following everything, so how come I got to pay money, okay, compensation? And of course, the national code, Danish code, asks to the Court of Justice, should I consider legitimate expectations in my reasoning? Should I consider the fact that this employer was doing everything he or she could to respect the law? And the court says, no. The court, of course, says, the important thing is to apply EU law is in the same way everywhere in Europe. That's the mission of the Court of Justice at the end of the day. So the EU law takes precedence, even if it is in the case where you have to disapply national legislation. So yeah, potentially problematic, but the answer, your legal answer, is pretty straightforward. I just want you to consider the ramification of the answer. So the answer is easy. Yes, you disapply national legislation, EU law always wins. Easy enough. Now, many of you have mentioned that non-discrimination has an horizontal application, so in disputes between private parties. That's surely the result. But if you read carefully, and you should, because you are good lawyers, if you read carefully, there is a difference between Cucudavesi and Ayers. In Cucudavesi, what we have really, if you read carefully, is strengthened vertical effect. It is national institutions, in this case courts, that are the subjects of the obligation to apply EU law, and in case disapply national legislation. So it's not that EU legislation directly will be applied between the employer and the worker. National legislation will be applied, but then the court will have to interpret national legislation in a way which is coherent with the directive, although the directive has not been transposed yet. Okay? So there is a slight difference. Instead, in Ayers, you have clearly the court saying, yes, this can be invoked between private parties. All right? So that's, you might say the result is the same. It is, and you would be right. But again, as lawyers, there is a difference between horizontal impact and vertical impact, and the court is much clearer on horizontal impact only in Ayers, whereas in Cucudavesi, it's sort of very strong vertical one to achieve an horizontal effect, okay? But it's through vertical effect of EU law. A second point that I wanted to raise is that all of you have identified correctly that the problem in Ayers was legitimate expectations. And some of you also stressed how this was problematic because the employer was following the law, and then, surprise, no, you're condemned. Okay. And that is true, as I said. On the other hand, I encourage you to consider how this is often the case with the law. In many cases, a worker or an employer will think, I am following the law, and then end up in front of the court, a national tribunal. And the tribunal will interpret the law, will have to interpret the law, because the situation, of course, is never perfectly the one foreseen by the law. And surprise, the interpretation will be different between what the employer or the worker thought. So, yes, the legitimate expectations are even more frustrated, maybe, with EU law. But in the end, it's not really different than what you would have with an interpretation from national courts. Right? If you think differently, please feel free to share your comment with me. But this is what I would suggest. Imagine even a constitutional court. So you have a dispute between two private parties, and then the tribunal, depending on your constitutional structure, of course, but let's say the tribunal sends the question to the constitutional court, and the court says, yes, this is against the constitution. So it will still be between two private parties, and there will still be a frustration of what they expected the result to be, but we would not say that the constitutional court should not decide in that way. So, yeah, I think the problem of legitimate expectation is real, but at the same time, it's something that we always have with the interpretation of the law, which is never perfectly what one imagined. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's easier to foresee, but in many cases it isn't. So, okay, this is all for this session. So I'm so happy when you have good answers, because it makes my job so much better, so much easier at least. So all right, if anything else is not clear, please feel free to send more questions. This time I managed to answer all of you by email, if sometimes quickly, and sorry to the one person to which I sent a half email because I pressed send by mistake. I hope you at least had fun, because my first email finished with the word spoiler, and you would never know what the spoiler was. Ha! The tension. So anyway, I will try to do it again. Depends really on how much I am recording videos all the time. A strange change in my profession. Now I feel like a YouTube influencer. Okay, so keep on the good work. This will help you for the exam. We still don't know exactly how it will work, but how I will add something about it on the next video I will record, so then we have all the spring break to consider it. In any case, I can already tell you that essentially we will do more or less exactly the same exam that we would have done in physical presence, just we will do it by Skype or whatever other tool for distance video conferencing we will use. All right. If you have any problems with that, but again, I will speak about it more in the next video I upload. Please you can already send it to me, and we will consider it together. We will find a solution. No worries about that. These are the easy things to solve. Okay, enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the video tomorrow about freedom of religion and discrimination on the basis of religion at the workplace. And keep on staying safe. Bye.